India now. Warm welcome, sir. Put your hands together for Geet Sethi, a 9-time world billiards and snooker champion, proving that excellence isn't defined by mainstream popularity, but by sheer mastery of the craft. His efforts through Olympic gold quest are shaping India's future champions. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Leander Paes, an Olympic medalist, Grand Slam champion and International Tennis Hall of Famer who played for India at 7 Olympic Games, a record for any Indian athlete. There is decades and decades of experience, hard work and excellence on that stage. We are truly privileged. Let's welcome on stage our moderators, Dr. Shashi Tharoor and Chetan Bhagat.
Chetan, what are we doing here? We are not world champions at anything.
I know. By the way, there is this, India में दो तरह की अंग्रेजी होती है. एक शशि थरूर की अंग्रेजी है, एक चेतन भगत की अंग्रेजी है. और आज दोनों साथ में हैं. Very rare.
Let's hear from it. So as we'd agreed, I'll ask each of you a question and then we'll let Chetan grill you and we'll carry on from there. But Prakash, I mean, I sort of first met you, I remember when I was on my way to graduate school in the States, and we crossed at Rome Airport when you were on your way to go and win another world championship or something way back in 1975. And I have to say, it's been amazing, your journey. In those days, we weren't used to having world champions. And just having you out there was an extraordinary thrill for all of us. What sparked your interest? I mean, this wasn't your dad's profession or your mom's, right? I mean, there was no badminton in the family. How did you become a badminton player? And then a world champ.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Great privilege and honor to be here. I think before I proceed, I think you need to know a little bit history about how popular the sport was when I took up way back in 1960s. So I started in 1962 when badminton was not very popular, especially in the southern part of India. It was played mainly in the north, east and west. Nobody knew what badminton was in the south. There was another sport called ball badminton, which was very popular in the south, played only in India. It's almost extinct now. So that was very popular in all the southern states. So in fact, if you went to any of the southern states and said, do you play badminton? It meant ball badminton. So if you had to specifically say that, do you play shuttle? So when we played, people were asking, do you play shuttle? So then it meant shuttle. And in those days, in the whole of Bangalore, there were only 5 badminton courts, 5. In the whole of Bangalore put together, and out of those 3 were wedding halls. So
your practice went
maybe slightly higher than this. So 6 months in a year, it used to be booked for weddings. So if there were no weddings, then we could play badminton. But so that was how popular the sport was. And I took up the sport. My father was living in Bombay. He moved to Bangalore. And then he started the state association. So he was more of an administrator. So I used to go along with him. And so that's how I got interested in the sport. Initially, absolutely no idea that even whether I would even play for the district or the state. It was more for, I enjoyed playing the sport. So that's how I got started playing. And my father was the initial coach. Later on, just picked up on my own, watching other players because there was no other way of learning. So it was only much later, when I started when I was 7, and when I was about 15, 16, when I won the national championship, that when I, thought of taking it up professionally.
So till then you were just a casual player, you were going to school?
Absolutely, we could play only for 6 months because the other 6 months, so I think the main thing was we had not too many options in those days. I don't think it was just for me, for everybody in the 60s, there were only 2 options. Either you take the option which you have, which is to play for 6 months, or not play at all. So there was no third option of going to another club, another city, another academy. So those choices were not there. So either you take what you had or you sit at home. So So you would rather, you know, without complaining, uh, took up whatever was available and enjoyed, you know, whatever facilities were there at that time.
Amazing, amazing start. We'll come back to your journey.
Yes,
Geet, your own journey was extraordinary. I met you in the context of your humanitarian work, but I'm going to take you back to billiards. If badminton wasn't a popular mass sport, billiards certainly isn't even today. What brought you to billiards, and how did you become so good at it?
So, Prakash started in the 60s, I started in the 70s, and it was, well, there was a Wilson Jones, you know, when you're 13 years old, you kind of don't really, you know, read the newspapers, so, but there was a Wilson Jones and a Michael Ferreira in the periphery of my vision, but I used to play all sport. I loved sports, so I used to play table tennis, badminton. I was a fairly good badminton player. Not a good thing to say in this stage, but I would play cricket, I would play basketball, and then I got the chance to play billiards. And you know, billiards in those days, in the 70s, you were not allowed into the billiard room if you were not 18 years old. And it was a place, it was always next to the bar in a club. And, but very interestingly, the sports ministry, they sent a circular to they sent a circular to the Billiard and Snooker Federation of India saying that to really get good quality players, we need junior championships. And if you don't have juniors playing at the grassroots level, how are you going to have a junior championship? So they actually sent a circular to the Billiard and Snooker Federation of India saying, you must promote juniors. The BSFI, our federation, they sent out the circulars to every club across the country saying, please relax your age limit from 18 to 12. And I was 12 and a half or 13 at the time. And it's a beautiful, you know, sight, a billiard room for a child. First of all, you are not allowed inside. And there was a small little 6x6 window. It's a dark place, but bright, you know, bright lights, beautiful colored balls and this green base. And I would always peek into it. And when I got the chance, when that circular was put on, I just went and I was tall enough and I started playing. And I just took to it like fish to water. And I used to actually swim as a junior. I was a state level swimmer. I represented Gujarat State in the junior swimming championships. But at the age of 13, within a year, I had stopped playing every other sport. And by the age of 15, because there was a junior national championship, the first time ever it was held in Jamshedpur in 1976. So as a 15-year-old, I went and I won the first ever junior national billiard championship that was held. And then things just, you know, you get some confidence, you know, and you start taking the sport seriously. But my dad, you know, he was an air traffic controller, and he got transferred to Ahmedabad, and he said, listen, buddy, you know, and I started playing like 5-6 hours a day. He said, hello. By the time I was 15, 16, he said, you play as much as you want, but must get a first division. In those days, it used to be first division, 60% mark. He said, for your 10th and 12th, you have to get 60%. And I would put my cue aside for 2 months, just before the, you know, board exam, and I'd get 60.01, 60.02, and he'd say, no problem, continue to play. And I continued to play. I graduated with economic honors, and then I did my MBA as well. But it really became a profession when I was in my first year of my MBA. I got D's in about 6 subjects, you know, but I was playing billiards at a very high level. I defeated Michael Ferreira, and that's when it really became a profession. So,
Great.
yeah, that's
Terrific story and inspiring as well. Vishy, when I was growing up, we never had a grandmaster. In fact, I think when somebody made it international master, that was news. What brought you to chess? We've heard what the other 2 guys' fathers did. What did your father do? And how did you start taking up chess? And how did you get so good at that?
So I'm the youngest in my family, and one day when I was 6 years old, I walked into a room and my elder brother and sister were playing chess. So the first thing I did was to go and pester my mother, because of course you wanted to join in. So I went and pestered my mother to teach me. I was lucky my mother was a good chess player. She came from a family where they all played chess. So a lot of my uncles played chess at university and so on. And she taught me how to play. Then I guess they waited for a couple of months, and they must have noticed that I kept going back to the chessboard and trying to apply what she had taught me and so on. Then they thought, well, maybe he's interested. And my sister, near her college, there was a chess club. And she happened to see it one day when she was passing by. So then the idea came, well, why not take Anand there and put him in this chess club. It turned out this was India's strongest chess club, the Tal Chess Club. It was in the Soviet Cultural Center in Chennai, and all India's international masters were regular visitors there. They'd come and go, and I mean, it was a small chess community, but a very passionate one. Many people who still are active in the world of chess and so on. I mean, you always need these people, this engine at the beginning to start. So I joined that chess club. So I would describe it as a set of lucky coincidences. Sometimes you need luck, even on the board, but I needed it off as well. So first thing is I had a family member who knew how to play chess. 30, 40 years ago, that was 90% of the requirement for you to become a chess player. Because you couldn't look it up. You couldn't just find a book somewhere. You'd have to go to a specialized library and find a place where maybe they had it, and then you could look up the rules. Now, of course, it's so trivial because within 5 seconds with your phone, you can have the rules of chess there, and an app maybe to even test yourself. But these were very crucial milestones. The second one is, of course, that my sister happened to stumble on the strongest chess club. Then my dad got an assignment in the Philippines. And so we moved there. And this was when I was 9 years old. And the Philippines was having a kind of chess boom then. So again, a lucky coincidence. My mother got me restarted in chess, and by the way, also tennis. So I used to play a little bit of tennis back home, and then kind of continued my weak attempt at tennis in Manila as well. And but the chess thing was harder to find. So my mother did one thing. She knew that Asia's first grandmaster was a man called Eugene Torre. She literally took out the phone book, went to Torre, and started calling each one. Luckily, I think within the first 3, we stumbled on Eugene Torre, but the man listened to her patiently and said, actually, I'm his elder brother, but I know a good chess club which your son can join here. More important, the Philippines actually had a daily chess show on TV where they would show a game that had been played somewhere around the globe. So this was fantastic because you didn't have access to these games. But they would find a game played somewhere around the globe. They would show it to the audience with explanation. They would analyze it and then say, this is the reason this grandmaster did this and that, and so really high-level education. And at the end of the show, they would give a puzzle. You had to solve it and mail in your answer. At the end of the next show, they would put all the correct answers that they'd received into a box. In would go the hand. They'd pull one envelope out, and that person was called to the show after that. So we entered a couple of these shows. And by the way, I was at school. So the show was always between 2 and 3 in the afternoon. I was at school. My mother would watch the program. She would write down everything they said about that game. Then she would note down the puzzle. And when I came back after I finished my homework, she would show it to me. So both my parents were very supportive, but hard to emphasize just how much my mother, and accompanying me everywhere, taking me to all sorts of tournaments and so on. So very crucial part. Eventually we won a prize, then we won it again, and I think after I won 5 or 6, and the prize was always a chess book, which was very, very valuable. So I think after I won several attempts, they invited me to the back of the studio where they had their library, and they said, help yourself to all the books you want, but please don't send any more answers. And when I got back from the Philippines, I went back to the same chess club and continued. I then remained a strong junior, one of the strong juniors in Tamil Nadu for a couple of years, with no real sign of breaking away. Then in 1983, I played, during the summer holidays, I played a tournament in the chess club, and then I went to the national team championship. Somebody, in fact, SP Balasubramaniam had sponsored a team of juniors to go and play in the team championship. An exception is made for us. And I started winning everything, and I still don't know why exactly. Suddenly my level jumped. So I won this tournament. I won the top board prize in Bombay. And then I got a chance to go for the national level. I qualified. So within the space of 3 months, I went from becoming a decent junior to being able to represent India everywhere in the sub-junior, junior, and men's events. A magical, really magical period where doors opened and suddenly I got to play at a very high level. 2 quick things to wrap up. A similar thing happened in 87 where I finished my school exams. So just like Geet, I had to stop chess for 3 months to catch up. I wrote my exams, and then I started to play chess again. A few months later, I won the World Junior Championship, the first Asian to do that in Baguio. I know that Geet won a World Billiards Championship just around the same time, so that was a nice coincidence. And then the end of that year, I became a Grandmaster. So in chess terms, that was another big breakthrough year for me. And the question of when I decided to become a chess player, I think I probably decided to become a chess player at the age of 6. And I was dreading the moment when I would find a good reason that I should not continue, but it never came. I think that's
Sounds
maybe
great.
the better way to put
Terrific. Leander Paes, now we've heard about how much the nation owes to Viswanathan Anand's mother. But we all knew about your father. I mean, he was an Olympic hero and a sporting champion. How come you didn't take up his sport, and how did you get into tennis?
I was a bit concerned about what not just my dad was doing at the Olympics in '72, but what my mom was doing. Because in 1972, both were at the Olympics. I was born to a Bengali mother who was 5'0" in height, and she captained the Indian basketball team. Mother, like most Indian women, have great intuition, great leaders of the pack. My mom knew every single teammate's children's birthdays, and she just kept the team together. My dad, on the other hand, was Portuguese Goan descent, 6'3", center half of the Indian 1972 Munich Olympics team. But what concerned me most was not just the genetics that they passed on, but at the Munich Olympics, for a few of you who remember, Palestinian terrorists took Israeli athletes hostage. The games were shut down for 4 days. 10,000 athletes in the Olympic Village are housed along one street in alphabetical order by country. So India was bang opposite Israel. So the German army was in, Shashi. They had boarded down the Indian windows, boarded down the doors, removed the televisions, removed the newspapers. No athletes were allowed outside the village, and no civilians were allowed in. I guess they had nothing else better to do because I was conceived in those 4 days. So I was born on the 17th of June, 1973, for a few of you who want to do the math. But being born to a Bengali mother and a Goan dad, I was born with these legs. Football was my passion. And in class, I would always get punished because I had a football at the end of my feet, and I would be donutting all my class teachers, my classmates, and this football was always around me, you know, everywhere I went. And when I was 11 years old, New York brought a football team called New York Cosmos. They came to Calcutta and played at the big stadium, and Pele came along with them. And I was a ball boy for that match. And the first ball that came back, I caught it, I threw it back. The second ball that came, caught it, threw it back. At the end of the second half, I got a little bored, you know. So when the ball came out on my side, I collected it on my chest, juggled it for about 16, 17 times and headed it back to Mr. Pele. Well, he looked at me and he says, after match, I see you. So I thought I was in trouble. And after the match, Mr. Pele came over along with Marco van Basten, and we did a little tiki-taka for about 15 minutes. And then they selected me for a junior European football team called PSV Eindhoven. I went over to Europe, and you can just imagine every Calcutta kid's dream where you play gully cricket, gully football barefoot, right? And then you're suddenly going off to Europe where they give you boots. You can play with proper gear and fields that have grass on them. And after about 6 weeks, the Barcelona scouts came, and I remember they took all the kids through the paces. And 2 days later, I was shipped off to Barcelona to the junior program. I lived there for 7 months, and after 7 months, they confirmed that I was going to be the playing 11 of the Barcelona under-17 football team. I was 11 years old at the time. But they had only one criteria, and that was I had to give up my Indian passport. To which I asked why, and the coach said, if we are going to pump in $1 million into your training, your coaching, your diet, your fitness, your mental training, then we can't have you play for another country. You have to play for Spain, and you have to play for Barcelona. So like a good Indian boy, I turned to him, Shashi, and I said, I have to go home and ask my mummy and daddy. Well, the next morning at 5:30, when I was leaving the academy, the coach came over to bid me farewell, and he said to me, I know you're not coming back. So I said, why do you know that? He said, no 11-year-old kid packs his bag in the room so well. You've not even left one toothbrush. You've not even left one shirt, nothing. I know you're not coming back. And if you leave Barcelona today, give up football. Because we are the #1 football academy in the world. So I came back to Calcutta, and I remember sitting in my parents' dining table. I always sat on my dad's left, because mom sat on dad's right. And my father was ridiculing me a bit. He was like, you've given up your dream, and you're so talented at football, and what are you going to do now, you know? And I looked over beyond my dad's right shoulder, and in the living room was my Uncle Basil's picture. And he was wearing a Fred Perry sweater with 3 tennis rackets in his hand. So like a chirpy little kid, I said, tennis, I'll play tennis. And my dad laughed at me for about 6 minutes. You know when you're 11 years old and if your father laughs at you for 6 minutes, it hurts. So I said to him, find me the best tennis academy, give me 52 weeks, and I will let you know if I can do this. So then, on the 12th of May 1986, I was shipped off to Madras, and I lived in Madras with the Britannia Amritraj Tennis Academy. There were 8 other kids there who were all the best in Asia. They were all tennis players for like 8 years, 9 years, 10 years. And I felt so out of place the first year because those kids wore collared shirts. My football shirts had a V-neck. They wore short sleeve, I had no sleeves. They wore long shorts, I had short shorts. And they wore short tennis socks, I was wearing long football stockings. So I was a complete outcast. And every day they would beat me 6-love in practice. And on the 12th of May 1986, Shashi, when my dad dropped me to Madras, he gave me a 100-page letter. And he was writing that letter for 6 weeks before I went there. And the first paragraph and the last paragraph of that letter read the same, but the rest of the 99 pages was about how my mother and my father were separating and going their own ways. I didn't know how to make myself a sandwich at the age of 11. But every morning we'd wake up at 4:30 in the morning, practice would start at 5 o'clock, go till 8 o'clock. From 8 to 9 in the morning we had an hour for breakfast and a shower. 9 to 3:30 we studied at the Madras Christian College. 4 o'clock back on the court again till 7:30. And then we'd come back an hour for dinner. And then between 9:30 and 10:30 the famous Indian thing, homework. And then at 10:30 when the boys would go to sleep, I would put candles in front of a full-length mirror that I requested for. I'd lock my door of my bedroom, And I do 10,000 skips every night. I do 300 push-ups every night. I do 3,500 sit-ups every night. And that took 1 hour. And the second hour, I shadow practiced my forehand down the line, backhand cross court, topspin forehand, slice backhand, quick volleys, low volleys, and then smashes. And then after I'd finished that, after 2 hours, I'd sit up and read my parents' letter. And I would not sleep much that first year. I cried myself to bed for 365 days. Until I realized that tennis was the only vehicle I had to become a man. And that's what that first paragraph and the last paragraph said. My dad said, tennis is your vehicle to become a man. I blamed myself as a young boy for my parents' separation. I held myself very responsible for the hardships that my two sisters were going through and my parents were going through. So those years, 1986, 1987, 1988, were really tough. But after 5 years of this hard work, I won Wimbledon for you for the first time.
Over to you, Chet.
Oh, these are incredible stories. What questions? I mean, we're supposed to talk about sports policy and Olympics now. Okay, we'll talk. Yeah, I have some questions. Let me just ask one, and all of you please give your views. Firstly, how do you feel overall India's Olympic performances? Is it you feel we are doing quite well, or compared to the stature of the country, is our medals haul not as great? And specifically, how in some sports in Olympics have a lot more medals than others? Like hockey, there's a whole team of people, but there's finally one medal. But swimming, I don't know, there are dozens of medals. Diving, there are lots of medals. Gymnastics, there are lots of medals. And we haven't won in those. A big, like, so why is it, do you think, in your own individual views, we haven't been able to crack those sports? And what's your overall thing on how are we doing on Olympics? And some of you with Olympic Gold Quest are super associated with this cause. So we'd love your thoughts on that one by one. Let's start in the other direction now, from Leander till Prakash sir.
My thought process on the question you asked about winning medals comes to geographical genetics. What is geographical genetics? The tremendous respect I have for all these amazing sons of the soil here is because each of them are self-made men. And I think if we looked at our entire country, most of our young women who have won or been on podiums or won medals or been in world championships are all self-made. I believe India has tremendous potential in sport. And I believe that India can be a powerhouse as a nation by using sport to empower the youth. Using sport to empower a quality of life. The session before us was about quality of life, and I was sitting there and seeing how relevant these champions on the dais are. If we learned the lessons of how they mastered their craft, but more importantly, how they mastered mental health, emotional health, physical fitness, I feel by imparting that knowledge to the youth and scouting talent at a young age. I believe in India we start very late with our talent. We're waiting until we're 8 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old, 15 years old. I mean, I would have loved to have played Wimbledon with Vishy Anand if he had taken to tennis, right? Can you imagine that partnership? His brains and my brawn would have been pretty good. But if we can, as a nation, look at sports science about testing DNA, genome testing, and looking at a child's potential height, potential bone density, potential muscle density, and by the age of 8 or 9, putting them into disciplines that fit their geographical genetics. I think that's how champions can be made in our country. And obviously it's a much longer answer, but that's the start.
Sir, Vishy sir.
So, I think in all countries you'll find examples of sports people who just follow their passion and do what it takes. But something like this has to be part of a bigger movement. So now there are two ways to look at this. One is a highly specialized model where there exist institutions that first identify talent and then funnel them in the proper direction and so on. But actually I believe a more natural model is a country where people passionately and enthusiastically engage in sport. 99% of them are not trying to win medals. It's just playing sport and enjoying sport is seen as a healthy part of growing up and if you work backwards, then that also means that such a country will have some sporting facilities at every village and so on. And you can, the affection for the sport, the passion for the sport will be passed down generations. It will pass down culturally. And that's enough. This eventually, if you think of a pyramid model, then at the top you will get some fantastic excellence. Now, in India it's a complicated story because frankly a country with lots and lots of needs. The area I'm working on or being part of with let's say Olympic Gold Quest is at the top where we try to identify talent and then see how do we support them to do the best they can and get to how they. There the aim is to take a small group of very talented athletes and ensure that they have the best resources, that they're not handicapped in any way in terms of what's available to them and get them all the resources they need and help them compete. But I think even this should fit into the longer goal, which is if we then win medals, you inspire more people to take part, you inspire the sport to become a part of society. Because ultimately, when I want someone to play chess, I want them to enjoy chess, I want them to gain the mental habits that you will get from chess. The sporting success is only accidental. And as a country, when sports become something that, a mass movement and so on, that's when it will happen. But with my experience on the board of OGQ, when I started my own academy, the Viswanathan Anand Academy, I followed a similar model. I tried to identify the most promising juniors and give them the support I thought I needed. I tried to imagine myself at their age and what it is I would want to tell them then, and that's the kind of thing. And one final point, that even though we're not getting as many medals as I think is our due for a country of our size, it's clear to me that now we are competitive in many, many more sports. We are missing narrowly, and people are not satisfied in missing narrowly. And that is the most important spirit or attitude you have to build. The rest, I think, will follow.
Geet.
So, I think I'm going to take up both what Leander said was about geographic genetics. I believe is a fairly important part of our of the reason why we are not producing caliber performances at the Olympic sporting environment. I do believe that there is at the end of the day, there is a very strong relationship between, a correlationship between money, that means how rich a country is, and their sporting performance. Now if you analyze that, so yes, the genetic comes in, but finally there's just no money. There's no money to the resources for an athlete. Even if there's a good athlete who's very talented, there's no resources for that talent to be nurtured. Everything 100%, to give 100% to that talent is just not there. Let's say that talent needs, for the sake of argument, 50 crores. It's just 10 crores that's being put into it. And at a world stage where the differences are so minute in performances of 0.001, it takes 40, the balance 40 crores to actually build up that final performance. So socio-economics, genetics, and I have this concept called subconscious self-belief. So it will take another 10 to 20 years when the socio-economic kicks in. Genetics we can't do anything about, but the socio-economics will, you know, the India is progressing, the GDP is going up, we will have money, we will have, you know, OGQs, and we will have lots of other foundations pumping in the money, government will pump in the infrastructure, and we will slowly start getting performances as we have started in the last 5 or 10 years, the last 2 or 3 Olympics. And then there will be one medal winner. There will be one Olympic medal winner, you know, in wrestling, and suddenly there will be this concept called subconscious self-belief. He did it. I am from his village, and I go and, you know, I wrestle in the same akhada. And that subconscious self-belief is extremely important, I believe. So we are at a beautiful stage in the evolutionary path of our sporting journey as far as our country goes. And I do believe, like I said, it'll take another 10 or 20 years. But like Anand said, we are, you know, 20 years ago or 25 years ago, our athletes, you know, I was there in the 2000 Sydney Olympics, and Leander and Mahesh were playing, you know, they were the only 2 athletes in a contingent of 150 people. There was a wonderful showboat that was organized to take, you know, it was a dinner being hosted for the Indian contingent on this lovely Sydney Harbour showboat. And it was only 2 pairs of eyes, Mahesh and Leander, who had confidence here. I looked at 140 other, and I interacted with everybody. I looked at 140 other athletes, and their eyes had only despair. And that is what is now changed. Today, of the 260 athletes who go for the Olympics, 140 have, in fact, all the 240 have hope. There is no despair in any of the eyes. And to top it off, each one of them are not happy if they win a bronze. They are not happy if they come 4th. They want to win the gold. And that itself, I think, is quite transformational. It is. So this journey will continue, but in 20 years, I am convinced that we will be a nation where we will be getting double digit, even, you know, we'll be, and once we start getting those medals, it's going to be exponential. So then 6 is not going to become 10. 6 will become 20, and then 20 will become 60. So I think that's what I see of Indian sport. Yeah.
I completely agree with all the 3 of them. But one of the main reasons, I think, we have a lot of talent in the country. There's absolutely no doubt, especially, you know, in the last 10, 15 years, or it's always been in the tier 2 and tier 3 cities. But all these years, they've not had the opportunity to excel. They've not had a platform. So in the last 15 or 20 years, things have definitely improved. But one of the major reasons, you know, we need to address is the administration of the sports federations. Because sports is controlled by the federations. And unless, you know, because we have, for any sport to improve, the sports federations have to be professionalized. We need professional people running the sport. Talent is not the problem, funds is not the problem. If the federations become more professional, you know, like in some of the countries abroad, especially in Europe and in the US, I feel we definitely have a lot more potential to win more medals. It's definitely not lack of talent. It's definitely not lack of finance now. Maybe 20 years back, yes, we didn't have the funds. But now the government is spending a lot of, people are aware, corporates are willing to support, lot more foundations have come up to support. And earlier, maybe even 10 years back, the support was only after you won the medal. You know, people who won Olympic medals would get recognized. But now, with again the Khelo India program from the government or the scholarship programs which a lot of the foundations have introduced, so none of the the talented, even youngsters, 10, 12-year-olds, if they're really good, they will not go unnoticed. They will start getting support. But that is not enough to get Olympic medals like the Americans do or the Chinese do. For that, the sports federations have to get involved. They need to follow the same program. And things are improving, but like Geet said, it will take a little more time. But we certainly have the talent, and there is every reason to be positive. It may not be, we may not be growing at the pace which we like. And like the moment the sports federations become more active, they become more, they start employing professionals. And if they run like corporates, I see no reason why, we cannot, do well at the Olympics.
Well, surely part of the problem is talent spotting, right? Because I mean, all of you came from families where you were able to get exposed to a sport fairly young and played fairly young and grow up. There are many others. I mean, if you look at the way in which cricket has been democratized in our country, when I was growing up, it was very much a city elite sport. Today, you've got Indian stars emerging from, Ranchi and Hyderabad, villages.
All tier 2 and tier 3 cities.
That, tier 2 and tier 3 and so on. Now, if you look at Viswanathan becoming a grandmaster and then a world champion, has inspired a whole generation of Indian chess players. And you almost feel that because Indians feel they can do it, we're going to have an entire Indian ecosystem in chess the way the Russians had for many years, right? I'm not sure that's been true of the three of you yet. Badminton, to some degree, yes, we have a few, but they're not as numerous as perhaps we need to be world players. Billiards, I'm afraid, you're it. You're the last big name in billiards. And Leander, you won a singles bronze, but we haven't had a singles player in tennis in the entire 30 years since you won that medal, or 29 years. And the worry that I have for me is, where are we? Maybe we're not looking in the right places. I mean, you talked about this business of testing people for genetics and so on. Who's going to do it? Prakash talked about the federations. Does the Tennis Federation in India have a capacity to do that kind of thing? I'm really curious about this because we've got a real challenge. The Chinese showed an amazing, but they were only admitted to the Olympics in '98. They studied the 2000 Sydney Olympics, picked all the sports in which there were large numbers of medals, many of which were sports that had never been played in China. And they basically hired the best coaches in the world, coaches and trainers in the world in those sports, dragooned a whole bunch of kids whose talents their system allowed them to identify early, and they were starting raking in the medals from the next Olympics onwards. So we can't do that. It's not, it's not our system. How do we get that? And this is I really would like you guys, each of you, from the vantage point of your sports, but I mean, Geet has done Olympic Gold Quest. You've got other ideas beyond your own sport. How do we identify, tap, and develop talent? And, let's make it a free-for-all. Any of you who has a thought can just chip in. Prakash.
Well, I still feel that, for that to happen, the number one responsibility lies with the sports federations. That is why they are formed. Sports federations are there to look after, to develop, to nurture, to encourage, to promote sports. And, unlike some of the other, let's say the bodies, like the CII or the, FICCI, the sports federations control the sports. So in any private individual or any private, let's say a corporate, wants to invest something, you cannot do anything without the help or without the approval of the sports federations. So I think the primary, whatever you say, like if China has done it, it's with the help of the national federations, they are accountable, and with the help of the Indian or the Chinese Olympic Association. So the primary responsibility, I think, would still lie with the federations. Everybody else can only help. But if we want it on a mass scale, I firmly believe that the federations need to step in and, be accountable and be more responsive to the needs of the sports persons.
Geet, with Olympic Gold Quest, did you identify some talents who not from the big cities?
Yeah, so we've actually at OGQ we've done a fairly deep study. The entire board and the operations team have done a study. And we just before the London Olympics, well, not just before, maybe 8 or 10 years before the London Olympics, Britain identified two or three sports which had a lot of medals. Which were they? The
Kayaking.
cycling,
Cycling.
Britain.
I think cycling, swimming,
Swimming, cycling.
where they have a lot of
And
medals.
they focused all their energies, government funding, university funding, and private funding. They focused on these four sports, which had 60 or 70 medals between the three sports. And they came up, they were not a very, in sporting success, Olympic success-wise, they were not very good. And they did very well in terms of performance at the Olympics, in terms of the number of medals they got back. So we did a kind of study, and I think what we found out was that for India, and we identified boxing, badminton, archery, and shooting as the four priority sport that India should focus on, because if you take shooting, boxing, archery, and wrestling, they're very technical sports. It's like they're precision sport. It's the genetic part doesn't really come in. You don't require huge muscle. Even though wrestling, you need great body and all, but it's a lot of technique, including boxing. And we said, let's focus all our energies in these four sports and see what happens. There was a little historical background. Rajavendra Rathod won a silver at the Olympics in Sydney, and so that kind of gave it kind of gave weight to that whole theory. But strangely, after focusing so much on shooting, we didn't get Abhinav Bindra got his gold in Beijing, and then suddenly there was a bit of a lull. We expected 7, 8, 10 medals in shooting. We've got now in France, in Paris, we got three medals in shooting. But that is the route to take for our country. We've done a very deep study. We have no chance in aquatics. We have just no chance, and that's the brutal truth. We have no chance in athletics. Because the genetic comes in. There is no historical tradition. There is no hero. There is no Prakash Padukone of the and
P.T. Usha heading the Olympics committee. She's an athlete.
But that's just and she was not an Olympic medal winner. She just reached there. I mean, she was very good, but she was not the best. So you need to be right up there. You need to be a gold medal winner to really inspire the youth. Anyway, that's my take.
I think there are some sports, where the difference is so huge, between the world standards and us, the Indians. It's quite natural it happens, because the sports are not popular, or so it's better not to, for the sports to identify sports where we have a chance of a medal, and that's what the government is also doing. So they are called the priority sports. So it's not that the other sports are not being encouraged.
Javelin wasn't in that list of 4 sports, and look, we won the gold medal in the Olympics.
Yeah, so athletics is there, but moment you find somebody like that, but for a long time, it's very likely that, that could be only one medal in the, in athletics. I mean, we have to face the facts. That is because there's a big difference, in the world standards and here, let's say for swimming, or some of the other sports, like basketball, football, volleyball. I don't think, we can think of getting a medal in let's say in the next 3 or 4 Olympics, because the difference is so huge, vast, between the world winners and...
But could we be looking in the wrong place? I mean, could we find athletes amongst the tribals in Chhattisgarh or Jharkhand and get them to... I mean, they're probably trudging marathon distances every day to just
Shashi,
survive.
Shashi, just as your question you asked, I'm very concerned about my sport, tennis. Because if you look at tennis at the moment, our association itself is sitting in Supreme Court. The players are fighting against the association. The association, there are different groups. So in that, I feel that in tradition, everyone looked at cricket. Cricket got a lot of sponsorship. Cricket got a lot of television. Cricket got a lot of limelight. But as an athlete, I believe we should learn from the BCCI. We should learn from IPL. We should learn from the cricket governing bodies that actually took the stalwarts of the game and made them umpires, made them administrators, gave them academies. I'm so proud of what Prakash sir and Dravid are doing down in Bangalore, or what OGQ are doing. In that, I feel like you must compliment Khelo India, because in the last budget that has passed, approximately 1,500 crores have been budgeted just for Khelo India. That's not the sports budget, that's the Khelo India budget. And I believe that before we start dreaming about winning medals, we got to create a system. And one of the things I'm concerned about is that if you look at tennis, in India, we've won 52 Grand Slam titles. We've played 7 Olympics. We've got the world record in Davis Cup. In India today, we sit with the Hall of Fame in India as the first Asian male. But there is no system in tennis. And that is something I think is imperative and really important, to actually come in and create a system, just as Vishy is doing right now with chess. He's doing such a magnificent job. OGQ is doing such a magnificent job creating a system. You look at Park Jindal, best Olympic training center in the country. But you got to get the knowledge. Parth has invested so much money in it, but where is the knowledge? So in that, I feel like, especially with my sport in tennis, to come in and create a system where the players, along with administration, along with governance, and follow that same system that BCCI took to create 200,000 cricket clubs in Bombay alone, 200 cricket clubs in West Bengal alone, 200 cricket clubs in Northeast. Now, when you go out into tier 2, tier 3, if you listen to everything that the four of us are saying, we're saying the talent is there, but the talent is being untouched. Which means they can't come to us, we got to go to them. And hence, opening up Olympic training centers, opening up sports science academies, opening up what the NCAA was done, the National Collegiate Athletic Association in the Americas, where every college student who has a talent in sport gets a scholarship. And I think that that is when India can dream about great sporting systems to move the GDP of the nation based on the academic scholarship, based on sporting talent. That is, in my humble view, what's going to make India potentially one of the greatest countries in the world, by using sport as a vehicle to empower the youngest youth population on the planet.
Vishy,
So, one of the obvious comparisons is China, because similar population, you can ask the same questions. But I believe the cultural factors are much more important. I mean, I'm no expert, but from the outside, I feel that Indians are much more individualistic than Chinese people. So if you see, even as a country, they have a track record of centrally planned, executed all the way down projects. And this could be railways, this could be electricity, this could be sports, just so many fields. They have a track record of doing things that way. So clearly, but even they weren't one successful instantly. Their government took what, from 1949 till about 1980 before they started their greatest hits. And I don't think most Chinese models would work with us. So one obvious thing is, in chess, we have done things totally differently from how China did it. But China is also a nation with lots of world champions, lots of women world champions. They've done very well in chess. And India has been incredibly successful in our slightly improvised way. So I don't think for India the central planning method will work and all that. But we need to accommodate much more spontaneity. To give an example, I think federations will have to reform a little bit and be more flexible and accommodated. But I don't think federations can do everything in India. But they'll have to be open to more, obviously not the word is NGO, but foundations, activists, people with ideas coming in and being able to participate. And that's the model look forward. I mean, we've seen it in chess. The federation has been helpful in some ways. But a lot of former chess players started academies on their own, where most of the best talent was groomed. A lot of spontaneous initiatives were allowed to flourish, and chess started to go very well. I think it's the same thing. We will need a million different models across India. The main thing is to encourage participation and have a flexible structure. If you take big successes, IT or startups, not everything was centrally planned and sanctioned. A lot of it was spontaneous, it happened and it evolved. I believe that speaks better to India's culture and way of being than a more focused approach.
Okay.
I just have a quick line to add here. You know, after hearing all this, I think we will really do well. And I'm taking up from what Anand's saying. When sport becomes an entertainment industry rather than a sporting industry, I think we'll be then on our way. It's just a different thought that I'm just wanting to get in. We need to make sport into entertainment.
Okay. Well, we have very little time left, but let's move away, and I want to ask a very personal question, which I was always wanted to ask sports people, and I never will get a chance like this again. So we can leave the federations and all the politics aside. You know, sports is a strange kind of field where you peak, and then it's over, right? Sometimes it's genetic, sometimes it's just age. And in some sports you peak really early, and then it's down. Sometimes you just peak because of an injury. And then it's a totally different life. Like someday you play your last best game, and you just don't know it, that today was the day I played the best, I'll never play like this again. And then you move into retirement and everything, and we hear people announcing their retirements and all. But it's been such a big part of your life, your identity, your every waking moment is about that. Is it hard when it's gone? Is it difficult? And how does one get back to a new life? You guys have obviously gone on to do other things, which is incredible. But it's just very interesting to hear that insight. And very quickly, because you don't have too much time, so maybe a couple of lines.
No, I think, if you are mentally prepared, that someday you have to retire. So, only thing that, sports, it happens very early. Corporates also have to retire. It happens in films. I think most, fields, it does happen. So I think it entirely depends on if you are prepared, like you don't get too carried away, when you are on the top, when you achieve something, be humble, because you know that, when you retire, you will not get the same kind of attention, you will not get the same kind of, kind of feedback so if you are prepared for that, it is tough. It's not easy, but I think a lot depends on each individual sports person.
I think I'll talk about myself. When you do something with so much intensity, with so much obsession, and I don't use the word passion, with so much of obsession and intensity, and in a sport like mine, I retired finally at the age of 53. So I've been playing for 40 years with a huge intensity and kind. It's just, I mean, you just had enough, and you just don't want to see a billiard. I don't want to see a billiard table, literally, and I don't go back to the club, anymore. So in my case, it's beautiful. It's I used to never cry when I used to play because I used to suppress my emotion. Today I cry watching a movie here. So it's beautiful. I'm experiencing life, other than the blinkered life of an athlete. And I know Leander, I know Lee very well, and all of us, I think, have done that. So I have that take that it's beautiful.
Okay.
There's no more madness.
Rishi?
Yes, a very, very big part of my life was being a sports person. And after listening to Dr. Ramakrishnan, I hope living a longer life will be a very exciting project as well. But that transition, when you switch from one to the other, is always tricky. I think the problem is, in order to keep competing, you have to have 100% belief in yourself and confidence and all that. But it's hard to do that when you're also thinking it's time to stop and how am I going to stop? And that's the tricky phase. But for the rest, yes, I think I will get to a point when I will be a human being again after being a chess player for very long.
Leander will give you the last word on this.
You know, my father kept on preparing me for Olympic after Olympic. It was like changing shirts. He forgot that the Olympics was only every 4 years. Then I'd win Wimbledon once, he'd be like, let's go win the French. Then you win the French, he's like, let's go win the US. And then in the last 10 years, he was very smart. He introduced me to both the Martinas, Martina Navratilova, who kept me going by teaching me the tricks of longevity, both in recovery, diet, spirituality. And then introduced me to the younger Martina Hingis. And then we won 4 Grand Slams in 16 months. But just as Geet said, I mean, the last 10 years on the tour were really hard. It was really lonely. Tennis being an individual sport and a global sport, I mean, a lot of what people see is the 7-star hotels. You see this Arthur Ashe Stadium and see the fancy cars and cities we travel to, but they don't see the sweat and blood and tears of reading a 100-page letter through 40 years of a career. And I'm very grateful to COVID for having a global pandemic to finally get me to turn my rackets into my mom. She locked them up and I haven't seen them since.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, as Geet said, I have taken the last 3.5 years off. I have a complete flat line in a heartbeat when I see a tennis court. I only play when I do exhibitions at Wimbledon or I play with my daughter, who is now wanting to be the 3rd generation Olympic athlete in our family. But I want to take a minute because a lot of you who know me know that I pay attention to detail. And I really want to compliment these 3 champions on how fit they've kept themselves, on how trim they've kept themselves, how beautifully they've kept themselves physically and mentally. And I keep teasing Geet and Prakash sir because Vishy and myself, we haven't quite got the salt in our hair yet. But these 2 guys are really good-looking, handsome men. So great job, you 3 guys, on staying fit.
Yeah. Well, that's all we have time for. What a lovely last session. Save the best for last, really. Thank you. I don't know if we can.
I don't believe so, because
I
we've
don't
got
believe
the MC hovering in the vicinity.
MC, take over. Okay. Well,
Maybe a quick answer,
Yeah,
because it's
yeah.
about
No,
your
I
sport.
don't agree with that.
The question was, do you have to be rich to be a sportsman?
Yeah. Maybe it was true 20 or 30 years back. I don't know whether it's been misquoted or, sometimes the press does not really, say what the player or, the sports person wanted it to say. But that's, I don't think, it will not be relevant now because, like we just discussed, there's so many opportunities, 20 years back, 30 years back, it was possible, but now, with so much support available. And the other thing, which I want to emphasize, if you've seen the medal winners, let's say in the last 50 years, almost 95% of them have come from middle class or lower middle class. I'm not talking of their current, when they started. You take any sport, right from maybe, Krishnan to, to hockey players, or when they started, their background, they were all middle class or lower middle class. Very few, maybe just 1 or 2 exceptions, maybe Navaba Pataudi or Vijay Merchant or, a few. Otherwise, everybody is from, not so rich families. So that is my take. So I think, and the people from tier 2, tier 3 cities are willing to work hard. It's no fault of, the rich people or the kids. It's the way they've been brought up. Because sports needs a lot more, than what the rich kids are used to. So if we want Olympic medals, we definitely have to, the poor and the middle class and the lower middle class, we need to support them, and they are willing to work hard. And also they are not looking at, going to IITs and IIMs.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, they have the hunger. That's what we need.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking that question on, and I am absolutely agreeable to Chetan when he says we could not have hoped for a better ending to Ideas of India 4.0. This has been such a coup for us to have these legends on stage. So many firsts for Indian sport are on that stage right now, ladies and gentlemen. A huge round of applause for our sporting legends, and I request Sumanto Datta, CEO, ABP Network, Rupali Fernandez, Chief Revenue Officer, ABP Network, and Pushant Chakravarti, Chief Financial Officer, ABP Network, to join us on stage to felicitate Shri Prakash Padukone, Shri Viswanathan Anand, Shri Geet Sethi, and Leander Paes. Not just shared lessons around sportsmanship, but they've shared lessons around life today, and we will remember their words. And I also do hope that as we stand at a new edge for Indian sport, we hope that what has been said here on this platform of ABP Network about the future of Indian sport, how it needs to be administered,